Welcome to the Not in the Job Description podcast. I'm Scott McLaughlin.
And I'm Chris Kiernan.
No matter what type of job you've had, there were situations that happened to you during work that you couldn't wait to tell your friends about.
We interview a variety of guests about some of their crazy stories from work, from entry-level food service industry jobs to doctors and attorneys. We will explore funny, gross, embarrassing, scary, and sometimes almost unbelievable stories that people have experienced while on the job.
Keep in mind that our guests or the companies they work for may be masked in order to protect the innocent, or maybe even the guilty. On today's episode, we welcome Jonathan Perry, movie maker. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
So, movie making. I have to tell you, my son Luke, which I think you know Luke, you guys have worked together on something. I have a completely different appreciation for making any kind of movie. We just helped him out during something he was doing for college. The kinds of things you have to do to coordinate and plan, and I had no idea until we started doing this. So I'm very interested in hearing about your movie making experience. But before we even get into the details of that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this business?
Yes. So I would say I started about 14 writing and flipping film scripts, short film scripts online, and that helped me fund my first short, Subnivian, which we filmed up in Marquette, Michigan, in the Arctic environment. And that was filmed, I just chose the hardest film I could make, really, out of all my scripts, just to see how challenging I could learn from. As far as that production, we did it on a iced over pond. So we had, people falling through the ice. We tried to keep it as safe as possible. At the time I was 16, and yeah, that was a huge challenge, and I learned a lot from it. And then after that, I went on to make Crookery, and that short was filmed at the peak of COVID in Ohio. So that was a learning process as well, more of an indoors film. Through that, I got involved with gaming companies and started writing, directing for games, video game trailers, which is great. It's like having an unlimited budget, but in a video game, so you can write anything you want, and animators animate it. After that, I got involved with the film I'm doing right now, Sentinelese, which is in post-production. But that started over a couple years of research. So it's been a wild ride.
That's pretty cool. We talked to somebody that was a production assistant, and they kind of just fell into that world. It sounds like you've known all along that you kind of wanted to be in this industry, right? At 14, I mean, you were trying to write scripts and sell them. So what was even before then, like at 8, 9, 10, did you just have this bug to be in the entertainment industry?
I actually kind of fell into it because at the time I was heavy into video games, actually, which so much so I was playing so much video games. I was kind of like, okay, what do I want to do with my life? Because you can only play like days and days of video games before you have an existential crisis. But it's kind of funny that now I write and direct for those games, which is great because that knowledge just came back to me, and I get to do both things that I love. Yeah, at that I fell into it, but I love the challenge, of course, through kind of most aspects of my life. A lot of the things were taking on big challenges. There's something about climbing that mountain that really makes me excited. And usually when I want to look back on my productions and be like, how on earth did I pull that off? And even though I did it, I still don't know how it all lines up and how it happens, but somehow it does. But that's usually just through a lot of people to help.
So yeah, I was thinking about one of the things you said. First of all, 14 years old. Chris, what were you doing at 14?
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, I wasn't doing anything. I might have been in trouble. I think I might have had a paper out, guaranteed.
Right.
So, Jonathan, tell me, when you think about doing this movie, and I'm sure it's different for different types of movies, depending on whether you have some experience in the subject matter, but how much time was spent researching and planning and getting everything ready versus the actual shoot time for a movie? Because I've always considered like the faster that you have to have an entire crew in one area everybody doing things. If you can tighten that up, I'm sure that helps with expenses. But what percentage of the time is spent researching versus actually production shooting?
Yeah, yeah. So that was a new process for me on this one since I had heavier research. I started working on development for this film the day after I filmed Cookery. I just flew out to California for some work, and from there, I just wrote and wrote and wrote and did online research, but then realized that most of that research is actually falsified or at least exaggerated. So then I would send letters, emails, phone calls overseas to the experts in North Sentinel, whether it be all the anthropologists that have gone to the island. I heard nothing for a good bit of time. I actually went to Puerto Rico to location scout for the film. Well, I was still hearing back from those anthropologists. I wanted to film it there, set that in stone, and then I got contact back from one of the lead anthropologists that actually ran every friendly expedition to this dangerous island, occupied by an isolated tribe. So over the course of about 2 years was where all this research grew and came from. And of course, then you have the Thai poaching aspect of it. So I had to get in contact with an actual Thai poacher. I have seen documentaries, but at the end of the day, again, there's exaggerated information. So I was able to get in contact with the Thai poacher.
They don't actually like to let themselves be known as a Thai poacher, though, do they?
Yeah, it's very hard. So we
Yeah.
had to go through Coast Guard contacts and then rehabilitation centers. And finally, we found a couple that were former Thai poachers. And, then from there, I was able to learn about their living conditions and the harshness of those crimes and stuff. And it's just insane what's going on over there. So that combined with North Sentinel research and especially with the gravity of this being the first film about North Sentinel Island was, I mean, yeah, it was definitely a large undertaking, but, and especially with my, at least expectations for myself, I have to make it exact. I have to make the canoe to scale. I have to make the canoe to color. All the different clothing items, everything has to be exact, especially for the Thai poaching living conditions. It's pretty dense as far as the information goes. I think I would have binders and binders of just research from these interviews with them.
Yeah.
So it was a long process there.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now, Chris and I both went to Columbus Public Schools, so spare us with this answer here. Um, exactly where is North Sentinel Island?
It's under the jurisdiction of India, but it is one of the close spaces of Sri Lanka to where the anthropologists would make expeditions to the island, the first of which were not friendly. So they would get shot with arrows. There's videos of that. And we're able to go into the archives of the local museums and actually pull things that haven't been seen, whether it be public as far as different artifacts from the island that either have been shot at people and
Yeah.
things, which is super cool. But this island,
So, like, this is like Galapagos with hospitals. Is that what I'm getting this?
I get it's an isolated tribe that yes, people have tried to go to the island and have been shot and killed. They're just hostile to everybody, and for good reason. I mean, when we're talking about a modern day, almost like when the Europeans landed on America and they would talk about invisible arrows being shot, which weren't arrows, they were basically the plague and sickness and stuff.
Right.
I mean, that's what would happen with modern day if people were to go to the island in certain aspects and they weren't prepared to. So it's very fascinating. It's the last remaining hunting gathering tribe in the world, really, that's as isolated as it is.
So you say this is still kind of under the rule of India. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. And there's different things going on with it as far as the island itself. Like, for instance, there's documents recently that want to lift the airspace restrictions, which could be detrimental. I mean, imagine crashing on that island.
Right.
It wouldn't be good news for anybody in that scenario. But there is, of course, international waters are around it, and that's where poaching takes place. So with this film, we wanted to theorize, and it's probably happened in the past, at least closely, where fishing trawler runs aground on North Sentinel. Uh, it's there's actually shipwrecks on the island that you can see on Google Maps, but um, and what's funny is the on Google Maps, the island has a 5-star review by a lot of people,
Yeah.
uh, which I have not been there. But yeah, we really had to, even though everything with the film was factual, we had to make sure that the scenario of this ship landing on the island was as accurate to what the tribe would respond to. How would they respond? How would the families act? Would the children approach? So we used past videos and research from the anthropologists to accurately theorize what they would act and what they would do. Would they defend it? With that film, we cover that scenario, so it gets pretty dramatic and intense.
Yeah, I would guess anybody who is kind of cut off from the world would see almost any encroachment as a threat. You know, I can't imagine. I think that's what everyone does, right? I think that's just
Yeah.
very tribal in nature. Something's going to come and introduce itself that you're not aware of. Let's kill it. I mean, that's been what's happened throughout history.
Our anthropologists have run the first friendly expeditions to the island. So they brought coconuts, and it was a long waiting process for that to happen. They've actually planted trees on the island, which is insane. And I mean, even the communication there, one sudden movement can just mean that they got to get out of there. So there's very odd movements with the tribe where they might show their backside if they don't like you, or certain universal language also that we took from these experiences and used it to make sure this was as accurate as possible.
So you said you started on this right after Crookery. Where did the idea come from? Is it something that had kind of been in your mind for a while? Like maybe you read a news article about this island, or how did you come about deciding that you were going to make a film about it?
I did read some things about the island. The one thing I wanted to cover with this film is that I didn't see anything close up to them, and I rightfully so. No one should get close to the tribe. But I wanted to give the audience an opportunity to get up close to the tribe without endangering them or anybody trying that. Really, you see the tribe for what it is. It was just a fascination rabbit hole that I went down. Then, after learning about the Thai poaching aspects, it just became more insane. Of course, it's each film has to be harder than the last, so I don't think I could have challenged myself more than this one, production wise as well. I mean, it's just where do you start with it really was the question. But and I started a lot of different places with trying to produce this film, and a lot of them ended up failing, but one route did work. So it's been a long process as well for that.
So I'm very interested in some of the logistics of what you had to go through. I mean, certainly the story in itself is very interesting, and you know I can't wait to see this thing. But I'm thinking about the logistics. I've spent some time in the Philippines before, and I think about the security. I remember getting briefed like you do not go north, you do not go south, you stay in Manila. There are groups in the southern islands that will take you and hold you for ransom. And by the way, don't go north because there's other groups there. What was the security like around the area you were at? I mean, there has to be a certain amount of politics and things you have to get around. Can you share what your experiences were and what you learned, maybe things you didn't expect?
When we location scouted on Puerto Rico, there was a little bit of security risk. There were parts that were like, yeah, don't go here, even though the beach we wanted to film at was in a part where they were like, yeah, don't go there. That kind of dipped my toe into what we actually had to go through on our other island. We ended up not finding our fishing trawler on Puerto Rico. We found it on St. Kitts and Nevis through Marine Assist and an excellent captain that was able to show me how the locals operate. But in the Caribbean alone, Puerto Rico is very different than anything below it in a way. It's a different world down there. Modern day, or at least the routes for production that we would take in the US were not working at all down there. They wouldn't work. It's word of mouth. We did press runs, social media runs just to find the fishing trawler, then actually figure out how we were going to film on this island. And I mean, this island's great. They have a film commission that is in the very, very early stages to a point where, yeah, we didn't even get a permit for filming. And the permit we did receive was wrong in many aspects. So we did have to set a precedent for some methods down there, and I could really see that island prospering in the future. But with this island, we prepped for months and months just to film on this island. At first, it seemed impossible. A lot of people told us it was definitely impossible to find like a crew of 70 people. And not only that, 70 people in that could do filming and work on the production. And because they haven't seen anything like it down there, really, they've maybe seen a little bit of destination filmmaking, which is where you might pop over to an island to film a quick scene and
Right.
it's got a nice beach. But here we had to live on the island and I had to source all local crew. And so that means, yeah, I'm the only foreigner. I'm coming to this island as a, what, 20-year-old that had to lead this entire production. And in the months and months prepping for this, I actually got injured and shattered my kneecap
Mm.
on an electric skateboard. So there's a lot that was against us going up to it. I almost thought that the film was cursed in a way because we had another person have a skateboarding accident and break a bone, and then another person in a car accident, and then just a bunch of things that, yeah, went wrong during pre-production. But not only are you finding a crew on this island, we had to find the engineers that would make something that would be difficult for us to even make in the US. I mean, we're talking 20-foot outrigger canoes,
Yeah.
bows, arrows, and the clothing itself as well. Of course, you got to import that stuff into this. It's a different country. You got to import it into the country. I don't think I was prepared. Even though we prepped a ton and all our crew is local, I don't think we realized what we were about to do on the island.
All right. I have a question, Jonathan. The things that you're talking about, again, you're talking about creating. I've seen a rig on a car for a shoot. You're talking about using boats. I can only imagine that is a complete cluster. Like, what kind of a cost commitment did this have? Did you have investors? Is there a budget to this movie? Like, how did you get this together?
Most of it is self-funded, and then we received a little bit of help during production. But other than that, yeah, it's mostly self-funded. I did exceed the budget a lot more than I thought I would, but yeah, it was just warranted because we were in a different landscape. I mean, my bank accounts didn't even work down there, which was one of the challenges.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's, we had the money, but there were moments where we needed the money. Money's on the island somewhere. Somebody has it, and
Right.
we don't know where it is. But it's like, yeah, most of it was self-funded, and it definitely grew as far as a costly endeavor. The canoe alone was very expensive um, to build. I mean, you're basically building a boat. They used a lot of the same methods, and then multiple boats. We had one that just needed to work, and of course hold people. And the fascinating thing about their canoes is that it's not like with a paddle. They have punts that push off the coral reef around North Sentinel Island. So our story covers a kid that actually went past that reef, and their canoes can't reach them, and that's how they come in contact with this poaching trawler that runs aground. And oh, of course, you got to have working bows and arrows too. So,
Right. Right.
and and you got to convince like 30 people to stand naked, mostly naked on a beach to portray a tribe that they've definitely not heard of.
Scott
Yeah.
and I would have volunteered for free for that
Yeah.
part, by the
Maybe a
way.
beer. That'd have been all we needed.
Yeah, the that's it's definitely something they haven't experienced. So we filmed it over the course of 30 days on this island. And when I arrived on the island, I was in a wheelchair basically from this
Yeah.
injury still. So much so, I think one of the people in the airport called me Lieutenant Dan, which
Nice.
I kind of took offense to.
Yeah. You're like, I got
I don't
both
know.
legs, man. Come on.
Yeah, and yeah, then working on the boat was another story because you do get sea legs and everything sways when you get off the boat, especially when you're on it for like 16 hours.
Yeah. That's good for a broken kneecap, I hear.
Yeah. I mean, I did a little physical therapy beforehand, but I had crutches and walking on beaches was a
Oh,
challenge.
yeah. I'll
Oh,
bet.
yeah.
Then, you got to maneuver into multiple boats just to get to our main vessel. The locals definitely, I mean, we had to do some street casting while there, and I'm they have block parties in the city, and I'm just walking on crutches down the street with my local group, and people would look at me absolutely absurd. They would come and stare at my kneecap. It was because it's swollen and they haven't seen anything like it. And then plus I'm asking like, hey, can you portray this tribe? Or,
Right.
picking people out. So it was definitely odd culture. I didn't see any tourists. I didn't go to the tourist parts of the island, which maybe once at the very end, which I mean, it was a different world what they
Sure.
were going through than me. Because yeah, we had a base house that was by our filming locations. And through that, we had production meetings. They had been building the costumes in that house while we were there. And of course, yeah, it's just meetings all day after as well. So,
Yeah, I I absolutely love movies in general. So I need to get up in front of that one because I'll watch movies all the time to the point where my kids, I mean, my son's in the entertainment business as well. He won't go to the movies that I go see because I see him like every week. But I really get a kick out of hearing the process of how that sausage is made. And I can't figure out where this was, but it was on TV. It was probably, I don't know, a year ago. I was watching the making of the Rocky movies. And in
mm,
particular, Sylvester Stallone was talking about making Rocky 1. And you have to remember, that's when people didn't know how to pronounce his name. He was a nobody. He was in a couple of little low budget movies. Nobody knew him as a writer for sure. But he was talking about how their budget sucked so bad for making that first Rocky film, and they were kind of sticking it to him a little bit because they wanted Robert Redford to play Rocky, and he's like, "I'll take this thing and walk away unless I'm the main person." And so they let him do it, but they didn't, they weren't really friendly with the budget. And he said that there were lots of things that happened that he thought was a curse, but it ended up being like, wow, this worked out really well. And the one that stands out to me is in that Rocky movie, the first one. They originally were going to have him go on a date with Adrian in a really
mm,
crowded ice rink. Well, they didn't have the
mm.
money to pay people to be out on the ice rink. So they just came up with the idea like, well, wait a minute, we'll save the budget. We'll go into this rink at 3 o'clock in the morning and we'll just say,
Yeah.
like, Rocky knows the guy who has it. And this is just going to be those two alone on the ice. And it worked out. It was very touching. But it was one of those scenarios where that was all brought on by necessity being the mother of invention. He had to do that, and it turned out really nice. Did you have any production issues that you're like, God, we gotta do something to cut some things or move things around? Did you have anything that you had to do that turned out pretty well for you, but you weren't expecting it?
Um, I mean, necessity was definitely with each of my films. It's like, I really just, I stick to what's on the page. I mean, if we need 100-foot ship, I'm gonna get 100-foot ship somehow and within budget. But that comes through, of course, a lot of kind people and people that understand it. But if you have a really great story, you can really get anything done. That's why it's kind of frightening when I have this script and I know that it's going to require a ton of just impossible things to do on a lower budget. And then when you do them, you also have this independent film on this island. And it looks very large scale. It looks, I mean, we have an immense crew.
So tell me, Jonathan, I know I've spent some time in the Philippines, and I know when I went there, it was for work, and I worked for a bank, and we had to get a ton of shots. We had to get all kinds of debriefing on, what's happening in the area, where to go, where not to go. And to be blunt, the fact that we were Americans, we were considered huge on the Philippines, where everyone's like 5'3". We kind of stood out, and we were a little bit of marks for some people when it came to crime. We had a couple of incidents. Luckily, I had a dude with me named Chad who was like 6'4". He looked like John Cena, so nobody was messing with us. But we people tried. Did you run into any kind of issues? Not that it was supported by the government or anything, but anytime you're kind of not the local person, criminals will try and take advantage of it. Did you happen to see any of that where you were?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we're under. an immense amount of stress. I mean, we're talking each department because they're also learning along the way. Eventually, like a quarter of the way through, we got involved with some individuals related to the production that had connections. We jokingly called them the Indian Mafia. I mean, they're the ones that helped some of the production get through some very odd logistics and also keep us safe. So I think what we dealt with was a lot of misunderstandings from the locals while on the island. I mean, I'm coming down there with this large project, and it does look like I have a lot of money, but there's not like that's not the case with what they're thinking. We had a bunch of whether it be people spending the production budget in ways that weren't approved of, and then they asked to be reimbursed or certain misunderstandings like that. We also that canoe from earlier that was stolen at one point. I'm on set. I get a call from below saying, "Yeah, it's not good. We got to talk." So I go to below deck and I find out that when we did rehearsals the day before, our canoe didn't get back to the engineers to get finish its construction. So it was just left on the beach and stolen because the tide wouldn't come up that far and it was placed in a certain place. And so it's a large canoe. It's 20 feet. So
Yeah, yeah.
eventually we had to regroup and I had to get off set immediately to figure out what was going on because that canoe was a key part of the story. Then we had the locals, since they spent so much time on it, I mean, they were going to find it one way or another. So we had teams searching for that around the island. Our connections with the Indian Mafia were going around the island as well. And that same day the canoe was stolen, we actually had an individual we brought over. We had my producer from New York, Erie, and then we brought over a kid from Harvard to help with lower management. He saw things in the script that I really liked, and I liked that we could keep on track with our story with his help. But I believe the stress got to him because that same day the canoe was stolen, I come to find out that he's smashed the bunk bed in our house, like a large bunk bed and fairly new, all the way through. And I mean, the room was just shredded wood somehow. And then he's gone. So again, I'm renting this house. So I didn't know what to think. We didn't know if he was okay or not or what was going on. Yeah, I mean, things, and that was almost every day. We had challenges that level, security risks, whether it be things being stolen or manipulated in ways we didn't want. And yeah, it escalated so much. The day after that, I went searching for the canoe on the beach just to see where it was, what happened. And on the filming location where this canoe was you take a 15-minute dirt road through the woods to get to this beach, and it's an isolated beach, and it's commonly where smugglers come and land, whether it be drug operations, from what I heard. And we would alert the police that we were there filming and doing things, but I don't think communication was that well because we followed a police officer in down the road onto this beach, and we were going to look for a canoe. It turns out a drug boat had landed. They apprehended the suspects right then and there. We passed their truck and went our way to look for the canoe further down the beach. We didn't find anything. I get back in the car, and at this point, I get a phone call from our Harvard associate that he's all right. Yeah, he's overwhelmed, stress got to him, and he's leaving the country. Super odd what happened to him. I don't.
So you didn't
It,
even get a chance to
I,
give him a beat down then. Is that what I'm understanding? Because, that would be, and he would be asking for it, right?
there's a lot to be mad at, but we had a lot larger problems. And, we didn't know what he was thinking or what his reasons were. I mean, I think he said that he was just reading on top of the bunk bed and it fell through, but this was like a steel bunk bed with wood.
I would have expected that Harvard prepared him more for these scenarios.
I would have thought too. So, none of these things we thought. He was fired from the production like a week before that for reasons my crew fired him. I didn't even fire him. Somehow it didn't get up to me, but yeah, we just had some issues here and there, but it wasn't that severe. And, we understood what we were doing. So it was just out of the blue for this serious occasion. But yeah, he lets me know he's all right. They had already located him on the island. Locals had seen him, and since the island's so small, we're talking like 30,000 people on St. Kitts.
Right.
They all talk. It's not hard to find anything, but we're still searching for this canoe. They let me know that he's all right, but again, yeah, he's one of three Americans on our production. Me, my producer, and him. My producer and I are in this car heading back from finding nothing with this canoe on the beach. Yeah, we get the call. He's all right. Then down the road, we see a military vehicle, armed policemen as well, just armed to the gills, and they're heading our way straight for us. And then they start screaming and shouting for us to stop the vehicle and get out, hands up, all that stuff. I'm just confused. But it turns out that the first unit that apprehended the suspects didn't tell the second unit that they got the smugglers. So we were mistaken for them, especially since we looked of a different nationality.
Yeah.
At the time, we had also one of the caretakers of the house with us. And I mean, he was a sweet older man, just super sweet. And he's like, I've never gotten a parking ticket. And all of a sudden, they're forcing him to the ground, and they're forcing all of us to the ground. And I was like, he was actually teaching me to drive at that point because they drive on the other side of the road.
Right.
So it was just I don't think he also understood how the movie was made and like what scale we were working with. But yeah, we had to explain to them what was going on, and that our canoe was stolen, and they were also searching for it at the time around the island. So it was just a mistake there. That was one of the two times our production got kind of swatted. The second time was I was on a ship that was matching the same distance as the beach. We had to go around the island to get to the beach with the large ship. And so I was on it with a unit on the ship, and we had a unit on the beach that was filming the ship and the ship filming the beach. That's quite an operation as well. And we had a speedboat following as well with a drone. So all these things had to come together, and we arrive towards the beach, and there was a delay. I hear of the walkie, just them, yeah, getting confronted by the military. So that wasn't great. And of course, this ship is so large that you only have a certain amount of times to circle back without the fuel running out. So I think the captain showed our trajectory after the day was over, and it was just zigzags for miles and miles that I didn't even realize. We ended up getting the shot on the beach of the ship, and their SWAT incident was settled. But well, let me go back for a second. That canoe, a day or so later, we locals spotted it in over a fisherman's fence, and so then it became an operation to get it back. And it's not easy to get a 20-foot outrigger canoe over a fence. They all did it over the course of pitch dark night. They stole back the canoe, and then it went back to our engineers, and we continued working on it. And then we had individuals damage the house, even though it's per their contract that they need to fix any repairs and pay for them that they've done. Contracts we found down there meant nothing. Even I was handing these people a contract and being like, "Hey, this is my word."
Right.
And they're like, "I don't want to sign it," or yeah, they didn't trust it.
Well, did they even have a legal process if they didn't meet the contract needs that you could go and like try to use the legal process to your to make it right?
Um, yeah, they do have lawyers on the island. I think it maybe that is a good point. Maybe it was harder and they just didn't want to get involved with that, or I
Right.
think it's because they've had bad past experiences with people coming to their island and providing work.
Yeah.
So also you have the difficulties of these union films coming over for destination filmmaking and paying them outrageous sums. Like sums where I'm looking at them compared to US productions and I'm like, what on earth are they doing on this island? They're kind of tainting the view of what film industry is. And so that also gave our perspective of the production from the locals. where they thought, oh, here's a lot of money coming in. Like, oh,
Yeah.
well, and also different methods with independent film were used than union films, so they were not used to it and they didn't believe in certain aspects. So I understand the misunderstanding there, but
Yeah, they expected you to back up the gravy train, and you didn't quite have the Brinks truck with you.
yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, contractually, we did everything we needed to do and explained to them, everything that was going on. But I think that we had a couple instances where we were held ransom in some ways.
Yeah.
We had the canoe held ransom after it was stolen by an individual who didn't even have anything to do with constructing the canoe, which didn't make sense. They just called me up on set one day and was like, "Hey, you're not getting your canoe unless you pay me this amount of money." And then
Nice
I called
move.
the
Yeah.
person constructing the canoe, and they're like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm working on it right now." I'm like, "What the hell is going
That's enterprising, man. I got to give my hats off to that person.
on?"
That's a
And
pretty
then
gutsy
we
move.
Yeah. I mean, nothing prepares you for these things. At least I wasn't prepared. I didn't usually you get a fixer for these international productions, and but the thing is all our crew was locals, so we really didn't need one because they all knew the island. One time we got held ransom, another time was, yeah, we had an individual hold media files from us. Again, they had a contract and somehow they didn't believe in that contract, which didn't make sense. But I called the police. I'm like, hey, I got this contract. I am a foreigner. And the police, they're like, oh, you're not being held ransom. It's just media. And I was like, well, it's on
Uh,
my SD cards and stuff.
right.
And it's a physical thing you can steal, and they just didn't understand that it was like media, and they didn't see it as stealing for some reason, and they also called the individual, and then that just inflames them more because
Right.
they're like, why did you call the police on me? These things just wouldn't fly in the US at all, like,
Right.
but again, it's the entire island's word against mine in a way in those situations. It's just a different world down there.
Yeah, definitely there's a home court advantage that you're probably not going to get being the foreigner.
Yeah, yeah. It's when people do damages to the house and they threaten to call the police. Well, yeah, if they call the police, my passport's blocked. I can't get off the island, even though they're the ones in the wrong. I have to go along with it and yeah, just take the bullet there. So it's yeah, yeah. It was just all at some point it just became a matter of just getting off the island because it was just not great working conditions at all. And
So let me ask, all these different obstacles and things, and you gave yourself a 30-day timeline. Did you end up getting everything done in your 30 days, or did some of these obstacles create additional days on the island, or?
yeah, yeah. We finished everything in 30 days. We got it done. The one thing we did have to cut a couple scenes short with the canoe being stolen. But when we got it back, we got most of those scenes back. But then yeah, another challenge with those scenes itself as well is we had to level an entire beach landscape wise with construction just to get the aesthetics of the beach we're looking for.
Right.
And of course, you got to rake it and do a bunch of smaller things. But um, yeah, all these things, especially with working on Caribbean time, which is, of course, yeah, again, that delay of everything. It was rarely we would start on time, and that's even when people are paid. So, um, yeah, it's odd how it works down there.
So you get through your 30 days, now you're back home. So, I mean, is the movie pretty much done, or are you still a lot of post-production to do, or when do you think it's going to be ready for distribution or to be put out there?
So we're just starting off in post-production. It's going to be a 21-minute short film. We got a crew of about 48 people. The crew on the island was about 70 to 80 people. And yeah, it's taken some time as well to get those individuals and talented ones as well. It's just super duper dense, especially with the aesthetics behind it. But we'll have to have behind the scenes kind of few videos come out. But at the moment, we're posting behind the scenes on our social media, Sentinelese film. on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I think I also now have a TikTok at Jonathan Perry Films, and I do have an Insta, Jonathan Perry Films. Yeah, what we're looking to do with this film is do a few screenings in person, and I want the individuals to, and I don't think I've said this before, I want the audience to have a direct Q&A with the Sentinelese expert and a Thai poacher themselves. And then, of course, we'll go through film festivals as well.
All right. Well, thanks again. And maybe one last time here, could you tell us the name of the movie and when it does come out, is it going to be released? I know you said film festival, so will it be like in theaters or will it ultimately end up on streaming, or is that something you're still trying to kind of work through?
You can go follow the film at Sentinelese Film on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And of course, myself on Instagram, Jonathan Perry Films. That will get you all the updates up until the release. But you can see some of the insane BTS on those social media platforms.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Jonathan, we really thank you for joining us. As we wrap up, this is the time I ask Chris the question, what did we learn today?
Yep, I think I learned that maybe I need help from the Indian Mafia if I'm ever on St. Kitts and Nevis.
That's a pretty good idea. I think what I learned today is put a lock and chain on that canoe, man. That had to be a pain in the ass. Outstanding. Well, again, thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Jonathan. And as we wrap up, I'm Scott McLaughlin.
I'm Chris Kiernan.
And we're saying, we'll see you at work.
Thank you for listening to the Not in the Job Description podcast. If you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, please let us know by sending us an email with a brief description of your story to stories@notinthejob.com.